it can impact on your ability to be compassionate. When you've had, a new policy brought in for the 10 millionth time, which is so similar to the one we had 6 times ago, it makes you go, what am I doing? It impacts on your ability to be compassionate about how you're working, where you're working. There might be internal conflict. That's another thing that happens within nursing. There might be some kind of, problems between staff, between leadership and staff, between different departments even. So, that can get in the way of us being able to be compassionate. And also think about what we do. It can be physically and emotionally draining. There have been times when I've gone home from work and there's nothing. I've got nothing more to give. I'm done. I can't talk. I'll just crawl upstairs and get into bed. And I'll go to sleep and think, God, I hope tomorrow's better. There are times like that. And that's the nature of the work that we do. That there are days where we are really tested. And to be honest, walking a mile in another man's shoes, you'd be lucky if you walk a few steps, because there's just nothing left to give. And that makes us less compassionate. So what does that look like then? So if we're there and we've got compassion fatigue, what does that look like? Well, that means that we're not thinking about our patients, we're maybe not assessing risk, doing our job as well as we could. We could start get defensive. What do you mean? What do you mean I didn't speak to him very nicely? Who are you to tell me I didn't speak to him very nicely? You can see how it happens. We start to look inwards. So we start to become very introspective. I'm tired, I'm worn out, this job's doing my head in, I've not slept properly, etc., etc. So when we start to do that, we lose sight of what's going on around us. We can become more secretive. We can trust people perhaps we shouldn't. We start to accept poor standards. Is anyone familiar with something called the Francis Report?
Yeah.
Is that something that you've looked at?
Yeah.
So that's about Mid Staffordshire NHS Trust. And basically the CQC report was very clear that as a trust, they basically said, we're quite happy with people dying unnecessarily, patients lying in faeces and urine, patients not being given pain medication, not being given drinks and food, being malnourished in a hospital, for God's sake. We're quite happy with that. Something really, really wrong if the standards of care have become so poor that we're okay with that. Our priority is that the patient comes first. Okay? Always. If you want to go into nursing, the patient comes first. You don't come first. So you can see why we can get this kind of imbalance. Where if we're putting the patient first all the time, we come second. And we've acknowledged, haven't we, that we're rubbish at looking after ourselves. So, it's quite a balancing act. In Mid Staffordshire, there were some really, really good nurses. There were some amazing nurses, some amazing clinicians, amazing healthcare professionals, but you don't hear about them. You don't hear about people in that organisation that were doing their damnedest in a good job. You don't hear about them. And this is where, people who are conscientious and hard-working get lost in the unpleasantness. There was, I don't know if you're familiar, in the UK there's a programme called Panorama, which is like an investigative programme, and it picks up on kind of hot topics. And last year there was a Panorama programme on a place called Edenfield, which is a secure mental health hospital, part of Greater Manchester Mental Health. It's online if you want to go and watch it. Basically a whistleblower came out and went in and filmed undercover. And I sat and watched it and I could have cried.
It's horrible.
It was horrible. It was awful. Because that's my profession, that's mental health nursing. I was absolutely appalled. The thing that was more difficult watching it was the staff. I came to this university from another university, and some of those people in that programme had been taught by myself and my colleagues. They'd left that university as kind, compassionate, caring people. I could have fallen off my chair watching, going, what the hell has happened to you? This is not who you were as a person. This is not, I don't recognise you. And the fact is that they went and worked in an organisation that was toxic, where there was no compassion, there was no care. And they slowly and insidiously became part of this ugly culture where it's perfectly okay to call patients names and behave inappropriately and engage in practices that are unlawful. So it's having that self-awareness again. You know, if you are suffering from compassion fatigue, you are more likely just to get sucked down a rabbit hole you don't want to get sucked down. Any questions so far? Fantastic. We can become defensive. You know, if we are becoming burnt out, which is a concept I'm really hoping that you're not familiar with and have not experienced. I have. You recognise it too late. You know, something happens where you either leave your job, or you know, you have to take some time off, or you just become really unhappy with where you're working. That kind of burnout, you know, you can become quite defensive. It's a way of protecting ourselves. It's a way of, you know, if we are challenged every day at work and we are struggling every day at work, we have to have some kind of defence mechanism, don't we? And it might be that, you know, it's standing there when a patient's talking to you going, you know? It's not great. If we become defensive practitioners, we can lose touch with what the issue is, what the reality of the issue is. We may start blaming patients. So in mental health care, we used to hear this term a lot about revolving door. Revolving door patients. Bloody patients coming in. He's only been discharged a week ago and he's back already. It's like a revolving door. He just comes for his dinners and, you know, why aren't we asking the question why? Why does this man need to keep being readmitted? What is going on in his life where he feels a psychiatric unit is the best place for him to be? But, you know, there start to be these emotions that are difficult to deal with. So you start to say it's a him problem. What's he doing? And talking about the patient in a negative way. We've lost touch with the reality of the issue if we do that. Just look at mindfulness. Does anyone know what mindfulness mindfulness is, because it has different meanings. So in medical healthcare, when we talk about mindfulness, we talk about how we can support people to deal with things like anxiety and depression. We teach cognitive behavioural strategies. That's what we talk to when we're thinking about mindfulness. What I'm talking to you about is not quite that. What I'm talking to you about is how our minds can become full of work, stress, patient care, writing up notes, this, that and the other, so that we become very stressed, that we perhaps may lose our awareness that our compassion is becoming compromised. So we can be mindful of stuff, and also we can be mindful of when we are stressed and mithered, that there are things that we can do. Does anyone know a good, really easy strategy that when you're feeling very stressed and anxious and worried and panicked about something?
Yes.
Who said yes? Tell me what's a good strategy?
It's just to take your mind off it.
Okay.
And be calm.
Yeah.
You know that the world is not going to end in that situation. So
Yeah.
just put your mind at ease.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done.
It is easier said than done. Because what happens when we are stressed and anxious, our body produces adrenaline.
Yeah.
And adrenaline is the hormone that makes our heart race,
Panic
and
more.
us sweat, and we can't think clearly. A good way to get to grips with that, this is not really, about this session, but I'm trying to teach you something. 5 things. Okay, so we teach this in mental health care. Okay, we teach this kind of mindfulness technique. So when somebody's really, really anxious and stressed and mithered and struggling, it could be you, it could be somebody else. Just think 5 things. So the first one, just in your mind, or encourage the other person, 5 things that you can see. I can see a lady with red hair, I can see the blinds on the windows, I can see the bridge in Manchester. What that does is make that adrenaline, where it's being produced in the brain, it just distracts it, it breaks that cycle that's happening. Where you're worrying, adrenaline's being produced, so it makes you worry more, so more adrenaline gets produced. So, name 5 things you can see. Name 4 things you can hear. Name 3 things that you can smell. Name 2 things that you can touch. Name 1 thing that you could perhaps taste. So what you're doing is when somebody's mind is full, they're anxious, they're stressed, you're teaching them a mindful technique of those just 5 simple things to do. And it works really, really well because it's a strategy where you break that cycle of panic, adrenaline, panic, adrenaline, panic, adrenaline. Dead simple. So if you learn nothing else today, you learn how to support someone mindfully with a technique. So, we need to be mindful of how stress, pressure can get to us. So you're on a deadline, are you not? You've got a presentation, a group presentation to do, you're on a deadline. When does that have to be submitted?
It's 26th of June.
When, sorry?
26th of June.
26th of June.
June, yeah.
June. Okay, so we've got a few weeks yet. So we're mindful that it's coming up, but I'm guessing no one's too stressed about it yet.
Not yet. Towards the deadline.
More or less.
I'm guessing on the 19th of June,
Then we start panicking.
then if we're not ready or we're worried about doing the presentation, we will start